This is Propulsion, the podcast where we dive deep into the nitty-gritty of taking your business and your practice to the next level. Whether you are an entrepreneur, a franchisee, or a financial planning pro, you are in the right place. We're talking the latest tech, best practices, and expert insights, all while keeping it real and entertaining. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's get ready to blast off. I'm your host, Francois de Toey. Mr. Groeneveld, good morning. Welcome to Propulsion Live, finally.
Morning, Francois, and morning, everyone who's listening in.
Hey, fantastic. Thanks for your time, Dirk. I'm excited to be chatting to you, as I mentioned like a billion times about this morning. You're one of those guys who are very passionate about what it is that you do. You've walked a long road, and at the heart of it all, the way that I've summed it up is that you want this profession to become what it is meant to become on the one hand, but also for our younger financial planners and advisors. And if I say younger financial advisors and planners, I almost want to define it as two different things. There's like brand new to the industry, and then there's people who haven't evolved from where they started. Like that's also for me new, maybe in some sense. And this is such an important conversation for us to have. So thank you very much. Looking forward to it. First question, let's kick it off, is just tell us a little bit about just your journey. Like where did you start? Just very briefly, where did you start and where do you find yourself now? And then we'll get into a conversation around lifestyle financial planning and all that good stuff.
Sure, Francois. So yeah, I think unlike many of the new entrants these days who go and study financial planning and choose it as a career, I think many like myself, like many of the older people, kind of fell into this. I finished school, did a 3-year diploma, went to the army, went overseas, came back. My dad told me I needed to get a job. And his broker eventually got me a job at 22, when I was 22 with Southern Life. Had no idea what I was going to be doing, but then was sent to Great Westerford for, 10 days. And basically taught sales techniques, came out with a rate book. These were days before computers. And then, you were basically set free. And you had, if you were lucky, you got a pile of orphan leads. Otherwise, those who remember the yellow pages, we would literally do cold calling. Being in PE, I was too afraid of meeting someone I might know, so I would drive to Dispatch into Utrecht every evening to try and sell an RA or a 10-year endowment or a family or education provider. And then, from there, I joined an independent group for a while. I worked out very quickly that stuff they were doing was not too kosher. So I was forced to go on my own. And then I was approached by Glenrand MIB, and I started running their financial planning division in PE, and then also in Cape Town. It was around, about 2000 when, those who remember, there was the dot-com crash. And then there was also where the Rand was, in those days, if you put your money in any fund that had .com behind it or offshore behind it, you were getting 30-35% returns probably 3 or 4 years in a row. The Rand then strengthened massively, and asset managers weren't answering their phones. And I realized that as much as I was trying to help people, I was actually just a pawn by these various companies to sell their wares. I was fortunate that I then, through a friend, got in contact with IPAC. It was brought from Oz to SA by Andrew Bradley. And I flew to Cape Town, met Andrew, explained my problem, and he explained what they did, and basically decided overnight to adopt this concept of lifestyle financial planning, which meant going from earning commission on investments to fees, which was obviously quite very tough at that time. Long story short, then, it was a year later or so, started Client Care as a franchise, and then Glenrand eventually folded, and I had my own business. So, I was basically a solo advisor for many years, did all my own admin, everything myself. And then and now have built a team and trying to build a business, a lifestyle financial planning business, we've got two other CFPs in the business, Alex and Ben. Our offices are in PE. I'm now been in St. Francis for 3 years. We've got an office here, which is getting nicely busy. So yeah, that's it really on how I've got to where I am. And yeah, and I suppose the biggest change was embracing this concept of lifestyle financial planning.
Mm. And I want to really get stuck into this, and I love this story because like this is still going to be at this point in time, unfortunately, I want to say the road that many will have to take to get in. And I've been having so many conversations. I mean, one of the speakers at the Global Financial Planning Conference was actually also speaking about how she dropped out after 18 months because of lapses, because of the way that the industry works and all of that. And then only like how long after that did she come back after having to do admin for many, many years, kind of thing. And it's unfortunate because I think we're losing some great people. But we'll get to that part of the conversation. Dirk, lifestyle financial planning. There's a couple of things about this. So I just want to know, like, if you say lifestyle financial planning, what if you have to explain that to somebody who knows nothing about our profession? How would you explain that?
Francois, it's very difficult, and the reason is that the public have been primed by our industry to view financial planning in a certain way, probably all about investments and very complicated terms which they don't understand. So even well-educated people, I think a lot of the time they think, can I trust this person? Does it sound like it makes sense? I don't really know what these things are, but I'm kind of going to go along with it. I mean, a lot of people who are great entrepreneurs, so they're very good at creating wealth, have never really dealt with stock markets and certainly not planning. And so, yeah, I think the way we do it, it's really difficult, and it's been a real uphill battle, and that's probably why I'm so passionate about it, because it's much easier just to go with the flow, to have the same discussions about funds and asset managers and timing and all this nonsense, really. Where the place that we add value really is in dealing with people and understanding who our clients are, understanding why they're unique, what they want out of their life, and how we can help them, lead the best life that they've got, that they can live with what they've got. So it really is difficult, but I think what happens if you stick to it and you know if you eat, sleep, and breathe it, then eventually, word does get round, and we get all our business through referrals, or I write a lot over here, and the articles, none of it is about which share is going to perform well or which fund you should be in. It's really about the human issues, and I think especially since COVID, I've seen a marked change in the way that people are viewing their own personal lives, which kind of plays into the whole lifestyle financial planning method, or yeah, the whole way of being.
Yeah. And if we then talk about that, because the one thing I'm interested to sort of get across to everybody listening is, Dirk, if we think about, I mean, what I'm gathering from what you're saying, let me just highlight that first, is that the focus is on the client, it's not on the product. Okay, so that is the first big differentiator. The big question that most might be sitting here asking is, because I think you've sort of highlighted maybe what's the main difference between lifestyle financial planning and traditional financial planning. It's literally the focus. But I think what a lot of people might be keen in understanding is, but how does that impact the advice that you give? Because the question is always, is the advice at the end, not in many cases, not in all cases, definitely not, but in many cases, a product. So the big question is this client-centric approach and this focus on the client and their sort of issues and their problems, and making that the center of everything. How does this impact the kind of advice that you give at the end of the day from a practical point?
So, Francois, let me first say, everyone on this call is going to say they put the client first. Okay, and I think we need to understand. I know I'm quite harsh on traditional planning versus lifestyle planning, but I think it depends on people as well. There are people who maybe don't have or don't want to get as personally involved with clients as maybe I would want to. And they're not necessarily doing a bad job, because they are still, some planning is better than no planning at all. So let me just put that out there. But proper lifestyle planning means you spend a hell of a lot more time with our clients, getting to know our clients. We've got a 3-meeting onboarding process, which everyone goes through, regardless how much they do have or they don't have. I think also the limiting the number of clients that you deal with. People who've got hundreds of thousands of clients, they're not. There's no ways they can do a proper job. I'm sorry, it's just impossible. I don't care how good your systems are or your backup people are. So I think you've got to restrict yourself, each planner, to a certain number of relationships, which is probably 100 is probably the top end. And I think if you speak to top planners, lifestyle planners, some of them are way less than that. And yes, the products do play a role, obviously, in planning. And look, we still get paid. We've got an AUM sliding scale, and the whole fee debate is a completely another discussion. But I think you just got to be honest with yourself. It's very, very simple. Deep down whether the end goal is a sale, a product, or whether you're generally trying to help someone, and then the product is just part of the planning that they need to be doing. Whether the money is going into an RA or a unit trust, or whatever structure is best for that client's situation, or whether they need cover. The big danger when I went down this road as well is that you kind of feel guilty about putting a product in front of people. And Ben, who works with me, Ben hates talking about product. But the reality is that there are these things that people need. Every income protection, people need it. If you can't earn a living, it's the most important insurance I believe you can have in life. So there is always a product in everything, but I think deep down, whether the end goal is to sell a product or you're generally trying to help a person and their family.
So is it fair to say then it's more about intent and whether your behavior actually supports your intent, and that clients can actually see also, because it's like I think the one thing I'm always very cognizant of is particularly the bigger businesses, they will typically go and say, it's the right thing to say this, but you look at what they drive through metrics, and you look at what they drive through incentives and all sorts of other things, and then you say, but how do these two things align? And I think that's maybe an important thing to add to that conversation, or to that piece that you just shared. It's like, it's your intent, deep down inside, but also does the metrics, or do the metrics that you track and measure for your business or your practice or whatever it may be, does it support that intent and that behavior? And is everything aligned? Because that at the end of the day is probably the giveaway.
Yeah, Francois, you asked earlier on about how we differentiate ourselves. And the problem is that when new prospects come to us, they're expecting to be treated the way they've been treated before. They expect to be talking about markets and funds and looking at numbers and spreadsheets and stuff. And although that stuff is important, it really isn't that important, because the numbers show that if you buy into a decent equity fund over the next 30, 40 years, you're going to be fine. 10% is going to be decided which fund you're in. 90% of your return is going to be dependent on the correct asset allocation, which is worldwide equities. I think, we've had instances where, we've had clients who, through COVID, had a client who went through a terrible divorce, cost him millions. He was in the event industry, ended up almost losing his business. He lost everything. He absolutely been a client for 20 years. And just because you can't pay us, we don't say, well, we're not going to work with you. We're basically saying we can help you rebuild your life, because we have that relationship. We understand what's happened, and we know that we can help them get to where we are. So that relationship's not going to be profitable for a number of years, but it had been before. And also it's the right thing to do. So yeah, I think just doing the right thing. You're not going to make as much money as the guys who've got maybe hundreds of thousands of clients, and you're just selling stuff. But if you're in this business just to make money, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's not where I am. Obviously, we need to run a profitable business, and we need to feed our families, and we all want to live a good life. But I think very clearly there are people who are focused simply on the money, and then they will focus on the client to the extent that that brings them more money. And then there's where you kind of you put your care gene. Barry Armani calls it the care gene. You put that first up front, and then, I believe that if we work with clients and we help them get to where they need to be, over a 30-year relationship, it is going to be profitable for the business. So it might take a little bit longer, for that client to be really profitable. And look, it is a challenge because we've got to run a business, and every business is different depending on the number of planners, the setup, your overheads, things like that. So I think there's no simple answer. I think the reality, and I keep telling a lot of youngsters I deal with, is that this is a really, really, really tough business to get started in. But once you break through, it is the most rewarding business out there, because we have the privilege of getting involved in people's lives and changing their lives from the inside, and to witness that is simply wonderful.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I must say, this is one of the definitely most noble professions in the world. And one last question on lifestyle financial planning, which is something I've been wondering about a lot. I haven't had the opportunity to really ask anybody. So I'm going to ask you this question, Dirk. One thing that you always say on social media, and something that's always somewhere in a post of yours, is real financial planning. So my question to you is this. Well, one, why do you feel so passionate? And obviously, this is not just you saying this is real. I mean, this is a thing with lifestyle financial planning, as far as I understand. Like, it's sort of labeled as real, or maybe even branded as real financial planning. The big question is just, is there a reason specifically for that? And then just the second part of that question, isn't it just a different value proposition, different kind of financial planning? So just maybe thoughts on that part.
So, Francois, like a integral part of doing proper planning for anyone is you have to be able to you're doing cash flow. If you're not doing cash flow planning, I've got no idea how you can plan. Cash flow planning means you have to have a monthly budget on what it costs to run your household, annual budget, which includes holidays, school fees, things like that. You've got to have goals, vehicles that you replace. You've got to have holidays that you go on. I know, Andy Hart will tell me that in the UK, they reckon only 10% of advisors there, and this way they're way more advanced, they've got way more solutions than we have. 10% of advisors do proper cash flow planning. And that's kind of what Andy calls real financial planning. That's like the basis of it, that's the start of it. So I think in this country, I cannot believe that more of the big players have not brought out proper cash flow planning tools, like proper real things that I know the IWP with Old Mutual is world class. It's absolutely world class. But when I made the change with IPAC 23 years ago, the biggest impact to me was that there was a cash flow planning tool, which, as basic as it was, just meant that you could do proper planning. So it's planning which the client then understands. So I think that is really important. So I think that's an integral part of doing real planning. And then, the focus just, very often the people talk about the client, but then it kind of ends up being about the investments and all of that. And the real planning is just the whole focus is the clients. When you have your review, you don't sit down with a spreadsheet showing all the investments. This one's up, that one's up, top up your RA. That's like 101. That's not real advice. That's going to be taken over by robo in any case. I think it's there already. Maybe not in SA, but I know certainly in the UK and the US. So real planning is helping a client understand how the decisions they make today are going to affect their future self. 50-year-old, how do I look after 50-year-old Dirk? How does he look after the 75-year-old Dirk and make sure that he's okay, while at the same time living a fantastic life now? So that is real planning. It's just really getting into someone's life. And if you're not doing that, then it's all about the money, which I don't believe is real planning.
Yeah, thank you very much. I love that explanation. And I was a big, I'm sort of in love with cash flow based planning, because I also believe that, how do you do planning otherwise? If you don't know the details and you can't see certain things. But I don't want to take up time with my views on that. I want to talk a little bit about driving change in the profession, Dirk, because this is something I think that we very much, this is very important to us. And I know one of the views and feelings that you have is that you absolutely love this profession, but there's also a part of you that despises some of the things of where we are. And I'm sort of, would you be open to just maybe elaborate a little bit on that and what changes you believe would be necessary for our profession to take a bigger stride forward?
Yeah, so Francois, I mean, obviously, look, let me first say it's got a lot better the last few years. You know, I've been practicing lifestyle planning for over 20 years. So, you know, when people, I giggle a bit when people come up with this, that, you know, we've been doing this for many, many, many years. And it doesn't mean that once you start, you've arrived. You know, I believe in lifelong learning. So we're always learning, always, and it's important that we're always learning. And the day we believe we know everything, of the day the party's over. But yeah, the reality is, if you go to any company, who gets the most recognition? The people who bring in the most money. So it is, and I understand why, but it rewards the best salespeople in the world. And again, it's not to say they're not bad people. They're really good at sales and they can produce a lot of income. But everything is still geared around, you know, production. Youngsters coming into the industry, I mean, there are very few businesses that are paying them salaries and allowing them to get into this. People come in with the postgrad and a CFP, and to be very honest, they know very, very little. I'm not going against the FPI at all. I love the people at the FPI, but practically, I think it's just a lively. You know, there's so much to learn in this industry, and it takes years and years for a 20-something-year-old to learn life skills, which is a big part of what we do, and to understand what we're really trying to do here. So I think there's still too much focus on the money. If you look at yeah, you go on LinkedIn and most people are talking about funds and fund managers, and you know, if it's in, you know, elections happening all around the world, you know, what do we do? We move it to cash? Do we do this? It's all absolute bullshit at the end of the day. We're a bit different because we have been this has been a very, I think this is an historical point in South Africa's political history and the history of our country. Thank God it looks like things are going all right. But generally, you know, the talk is all around those old things, and people are getting rewarded by selling a lot. I also think that there are not enough people who have been in this industry as long as I have that are giving back. You know, this industry gives us so much, whether it's personally, whether it's financially. And I see people who have made obscene amounts of money, who give nothing back. They don't help youngsters. They're always too busy. Geez, you know, I've been in this, I should be too busy, but I've got a chat later on with some youngsters as well, because they want to get some info from me or get my opinion on something. You can't be too busy. You know, you can't go through life simply taking and not giving back. So yeah, and then unfortunately, and I know this upsets some people, but I also believe there are a lot of people who are telling young advisors, and when I say young, I mean young to the industry, not necessarily young in age, telling them how to do our job, but have never actually done it themselves. Academics, and again, this is not a knock on any of them, but you know, and telling them about niche markets and this and that, and not saying they're good or bad, but the bottom line is youngsters need to listen to people who are at the coalface, who do every day what they do, and I don't think there are enough experienced planners who are giving back, which is sad, because it, you know, if you give an hour a month, or you know, every quarter, it doesn't matter, but just, you know, help people, because the best way where newcomers are going to learn is from people who've been through where they're going to, you know, that have been through those problems. And if you can circumvent that, instead of them taking 15, 20 years to learn the right way of doing things, you know, they can get that base set up very, very quickly and then grow from there. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no. And then, you know, talking about the newcomers and let's just say those financial advisors that are ready for changing things up and doing a little bit differently, maybe shifting focus a little bit. And I think what's important here is that we're not saying that you have to, but there's a whole new world waiting for you if you do. Like, I also want to put that out there. But I mean, what would your advice be for new financial, so new youngsters coming in? They've just finished their postgrad. Let's just, because a lot of times these days people are studying, like while they're at university, they finish their postgrad and they go on and do these things. But they then walk away with zero experience. They don't know what to do. They land up in a position where they say, "Oh, here's your, get a list of 100 people and start phoning." So what would your advice be for youngsters, if you will, but also for those who've been doing things the same way for many, many years and sort of wanting to say, but what is there a different thing? Is there more value I can add to my clients? What would your advice be?
Yeah, Francois, let me start by saying it's really, really difficult. It's really difficult. All the institutions, so your banks, I mean, they'll help someone with a basic, but basically it's a loan. They're having to go out and sell straight away. Life companies, the same. I mean, one thing I don't understand is all life companies, all banks, all these corporate institutions have got millions, must be millions of orphan leads, of people who aren't being looked after because of what the industry's done, where they've simply just churned advisors. And they're earning income from them. We have to, for compliance, we have to get clients to sign every year that we can earn our fee and this and that, whereas a lot of all the corporates simply just have all this money flowing in. And that money is an advice fee. And these people aren't getting advice. An annual letter giving an updated statement is not advice. They could, why aren't they saying, right, we've got so many hundreds of million coming in. Let's employ graduates. Let's pay them a salary and let's look and see if they can look after these clients. To me, it's a straight fix. I know why it doesn't happen is because that goes straight to their profit. So I'm having a go at them, but you explain to me how that's not the truth. So it's very difficult for youngsters. I think what youngsters got to do is they've got to look for someone to mentor them. You've got to be brave. You've got to go out there and ask for help. Ask for help in the right place. There are plenty of groups out there, even within big organizations where you can learn from each other and people can help each other. Don't be, if you're choosing this as a career, be brave. Don't be scared to ask what you think are stupid questions, and don't be scared to back yourself. The majority of the industry speaks a language which is still old school. It's changing, and you can find these people on LinkedIn, and I know that a lot of people will help if you reach out to them. But again, as I said up front, this is a really, really tough business to get into. And if you're not going to get a break where you are paid a salary so that you can at least live. Just on that as well, when I made the change 20 odd years ago, I downscaled my lifestyle massively, massively. And I think not all, but a lot of youngsters, the reason they've chosen this as a profession because they've Googled the highest paying jobs and they come up as financial advisor, actuary, and CFA. So many youngsters, if they send their CV to me, be aspiring CFP and plan to do a CFA. Now, those are two completely different jobs. So if you're just chasing this for the money, then I think, especially where the industry is going, you're gonna have a problem eventually. So maybe you should rather look at something else. Yeah.
Fantastic, Dirk. You and I have run out of time very quickly. I said to Dirk before the time, this could be a 3-day conversation, which it probably will turn to at some point. We'll have a chat. But Dirk, I just want to say thank you. I want to ask you, can you stick around for 5 minutes after this? Because I want to get to some of the questions in the chat. But I just want to finish the main segment and then we'll sort of do this after this. So just on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's great to listen to you and to talk to you and to learn from you and to see, what is possible. So just a big thank you for your time and for sharing so openly.
Thanks for having me, Francois.
Brilliant stuff. Okay, Dirk. So let me see. There was a couple of things here that I wanted to relate to you and to sort of maybe just get your view on it. So Grant said, there appears to me to be, as is Groeneveld, to be a move away from charging initial fees for financial planning, even amongst those who used to do it, in favor of simply charging an ongoing advice fee linked to the product. So Grant, I guess the question here is, because he asked any views on this. What I understand from his question is more around, is this just the thing about not charging initial fees or earning upfront commissions and moving to an ongoing advice fee, or is it about more than just that?
Yeah, so look, upfront commissions on investments are absolute no-no. That's the Antichrist. You don't want to go there. I think there's too much on the fee debate, and most of it comes from people who aren't in the industry. It's a lot of, and there might be some, but financial journalists aren't always, they've never done what we've done. They don't earn our living doing what we do. I think there's too much discussion around the fee debate where people actually don't, people haven't dealt with a decent financial planner. They don't actually understand the value of really good lifestyle financial planning advice. And that value, let me tell you, is absolutely massive because it changes people's lives. So we don't charge an upfront fee, and my reasoning is my reasoning. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way. I don't want to get into fee discussions because I've got good mates here who charge flat fees. I just tell them they're ripping themselves off. They're undercharging. The reason we don't charge an upfront fee is I understand that if someone comes to see me, they've normally been referred, and if they find me presentable and I talk sense, they might choose to start working with us. And short of us stealing their money, we can give them poor advice by putting them in the wrong funds or whatever, and we ruin their lives. Financial decisions can ruin someone's life, and they've got no recourse. So I understand, I see that they're coming on risk, and I'm prepared to share in that risk as well. We've developed an onboarding process which is non-negotiable. Everyone goes through it, or they don't have the option of becoming a client. So and again, I'm only looking at building long-term relationships so that I understand initially there's housekeeping to be done, sorting stuff out. And once we get people on track, they never question our fees. We've got a sliding AUM scheme. When we go to clients and we say we're lowering your fees, they're nonplussed. They really, really don't care. This is the biggest noise going on. People who are, dare I say, jealous of what financial planners can earn. And look, there are the guys who are the sales guys who earn a lot, but they're great sales guys. So it would be the same in any other industry compared to estate agents. I don't believe estate agents add the value we do because they don't get personally involved. They're transactional. Our business is relational. So we're building long-term relations. And the real value I see of what we offer at Client Care is that when something happens in someone's life, they have an established relationship. They don't need to go to 5 advisors, get 5 different opinions, all of which could be correct. But those people have no understanding of who the clients and their family is. So, yeah, on the fees, I think like when you're starting off, you've got to earn commission on risk policies, whatever. You've got to feed your family. And let me tell you, I've got a mate who's earning 90,000 Rand a year through income protection. And without that, his family would have been devastated financially and in every other way. So he doesn't care whatever the commission, what was earned on that contract, because it's changed his life. So I just think there's too much talk about it, and you've got really good financial planners arguing about fee models, and I think it's nonsense.
Thank you very much for your view on that, Dirk. And the rest of it was a bit of a conversation, obviously, that sort of transpired off of this. I don't think it's necessary for us to get into that. But it was, I think, some good questions. There is a question from Grant, which I also, so he obviously made that mention. I just want to see where it is now, because this is something that I think him and I chatted about at some point. And yeah, so here we go. So he just made this comment through the other conversations here. Better to try and measure client outcomes and reward salespeople who improve the overall financial health of their clients. So this is a question that we've started asking. Like I mentioned, like measures and things earlier on. And a lot of times we obviously measure the financials, we measure activity, we measure all of these other things that make a business work. But the big question we've started asking is, are you measuring client outcomes? Because that's at the end of the day, the outcomes is what drive everything else. Yes, initially when you get started, it's all these other things probably help you get going. Is that just something maybe just for interest sake? I mean, what do you think about that? And is it something you actually track and measure in your business?
It's a really good question, Francois. My brother-in-law is an actuary, and he actually told me years ago that's what we should be doing, is saying this is where you are when you started working with us, and then we can track that down the line. I've never done that. I mean, one thing we've noticed that clients who are good businessmen who are making good money, when they come to us, well, number one, there's no plan, and number two, they're squandering a lot of their money, and we build a plan for them. And if we look where they are after 3 years, they are way ahead of where they would have been in the initial plan that we built. So we keep on moving it. And I believe it's simply because there is a plan. When go-getters have a plan and they stick to it, believe me, like they'll settle debt way before we plan to do it, because they're those kind of people. And I think it's it's an interesting question. And I think it's something that we should be doing, certainly as a business. And I think anyone should be doing that. Just take a snapshot of where the client is today, planning, and then you'll look at it 3-4 years down the line. You'll think, wow, and that is the value that you add, even if you're looking at just financially. And then when you sit with we've had clients. I had a client who retired last year, and he just said to me, he said, when you came to me and you made me do a budget, and there was another 6,000 rand a month, and you made me put that away. 20 years down the line, that money's allowed me to retire now. I mean, I didn't even think about it that way. The client said it to me. He said, like, this is the single biggest thing that you've done for me. So we're not tracking that. But I think it is. I think it's important to track it, because it's also a way of showing our value. If we look after the soft stuff and we help people understand what they need to do, believe me, the financial stuff is going to compound a hell of a lot more than if you're just focusing on funds and numbers. But you're only going to see it later down the line.
Yeah, brilliant. And I mean, it really just, we are tracking these things per client, because if you have a plan, you review them, you see where you are, you adjust, you are tracking it. I think the only thing we need to do is start bringing all of that data together for the business and have an overall view of what that looks like for the business as a whole. I think that's probably the next thing to sort of do from that point. Dirk, thank you so much once again. Really appreciate your time, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Francois.
Alrighty, so my guest next week is Gareth Hopkins, yes, Gareth from Firestorm. And him and I are going to get into a very interesting discussion just around different aspects of business and whether tech can actually help you drive all of those aspects of the business. So it's going to be a little bit of it's not going to be a tech discussion per se. It's going to be a blend of a few things. So really looking forward to chatting to Gareth next week. So once again, thank you very much to Dirk for his time, and for everybody else who's been here. On that note, stay safe, be blessed and prosper, and continue to raise the bar even this long week. Love you. Bye-bye. All right, folks, that's a wrap for this episode of Propulsion. I hope you got as much out of this as I did. Remember to tune in every Friday at 8 a.m. South African time for our live show called Propulsion Live. You can find it at www.propulsion.co.za/live. And trust me, you don't want to miss it. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, hit that subscribe button or the follow button and share it with your friends, colleagues, and anyone else who you think would get something out of it. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next one.